Many of you know on this channel concerning music coverage, I highlight an extensive range of names, whether they happen to be based on my own familiarity, names that I've humored or approached in passing, or via your recommendations. It's an abundant supply, and there's a lot of names I've cataloged for groups to maybe happen upon one day or be introduced to alongside you, and I try to get through, on a slowly but surely basis. It does take time, but it's a fun venture for me. I've said many times, music coverage is a passion project, and I do happen to try and fast track the ones that have more of a mainstay presence in comment sections, ones that you're keen on me observing and being introduced to. So maybe some of the ones I'm familiarized in acknowledgement of in preparation do take a back seat. I am trying to get to them, and I don't like the fact they've taken a back seat. It's just been a lot of names I've wanted to humor. So Project VELA kind of sits in that space. They're a name that I've heard before for two of their albums, notably their, I think, initial EP, or one of the initials, the disconnected one, and then Canopsia. Forgive me if the pronunciation is wrong. I've humored that album as well. It's quite good. And I approached them, early on. I wasn't this is way prior to bringing music on in terms of focus here on content delivery. I had been searching around in terms of artist shopping, in fact. I used to utilize the YouTube shuffle mode in terms of their music offerings quite readily. So you'd happen upon one artist that you knew, and then maybe others would leak through, right? And I think this is interesting at Project VELA. I think they approached from that dynamic, as well as some of you might know how much of a Starset fan I am. The last album, we humored it in the channel together, in fact, Horizons. What a wonderful treat. But, I can't recommend Starset enough. And that's how I found out about Project VELA, because they were a name referenced when I was on Facebook at the time. I'm not anymore. I had been connected to a couple Starset fan groups, and this name had been circulating around with some good reason, even though I see more of a thread with them, because people were bringing up the similarity between the Disconnected EP on sound cues and maybe independent vision and some of the songs featured on Starset's earlier works. I found more of like a Breaking Benjamin connection, especially on War on Falling Stars. Like, you think of Anthem of the Angels, and the two are basically almost one and the same in terms of the mapping of the origin verse. They're really similar, even though there's a bit of a key difference and some subtler changes. But good mainstream flair, very much an emerging presence, at least from what I've seen. I don't know if they're classified as independent. Again, I have to deepen my understanding of Project VELA, to be fair. I've only humored two works in full, given again that EP and the Canopsia album, and I've been meaning to get to them. So I have in fact considered the list of songs they've debuted recently, and we will be happening upon them. But I found this to be a fitting entrance point. And you can thank Fallen in Reverse for this, because I just covered the Last Resort cover from them last night. And many of you know I like being able to go into the cover space. It is a favorite of mine. In fact, I have a whole playlist devoted to different selections I've heard from a multitude of artists, even abroad, right, internationally, that fit the cover regard. And seeing the varied types of tools and approaches they take to presenting works that are inspired by maybe well-known or their own pieces, perhaps, and creating a faithful reinvention that takes a track and transforms it into something really unique, right? The different tools artists play with. Maybe some artists keep it quite similar and linear in terms of a transference, and they're just trying maybe their own hand at maybe remastering the song according to their own types of vocal sets or genre approaches, right? Maybe there's some tailoring. Maybe there's an expansion, different key changes, pacing, different genre feels. I've seen a broad mixture. In fact, this channel has, again, what we've consulted together, it's suited that varied perception. Maybe there's a bit of a, mixed execution, for sure. I mean, I've seen maybe some covers that haven't landed, and others that have. Generally, on this channel, I've liked everyone I've heard. Maybe, we'll see how Project VELA fits. I'm curious to see, again, though, how they adapt Last Resort. That's the one we're looking at. In association to Youth Never Dies. I've never heard of them. This is very much a fresh look and a fresh introduction, as I love to do with music, right? To be introduced simultaneously to you and provide mutual experiences for enjoyment, right, of potentially good art. I mean, there's not been one song or one artist I've not loved, and Project VELA has been fun to humor, and what I've listened to from them. I mean, again, the Canopsia album definitely, I would say, was an evolution off of the original EP, and it showed growth. I've not humored a cover, though, from Project VELA. First time ever. Let's start the journey down the Project VELA route. I have, in fact, determined a selection, so we will happen upon them again very soon in terms of their original pieces. But let's start here. Again, following off Fallen in Reverse and seeing the diversification, perhaps, the application between Last Resort. Fallen in Reverse, again, I would recommend them as well if you're not familiar. Mainstream American rock and metal group. So good. I love covering them. I love their music. And that was definitely a reinvention. That's very faithful to them that they've taken works and substantially redone them, right? That is very much Fallen in Reverse's style. And that piece was changed, right? It maintained the mood of the original inspirational work by Papa Roach, which is quite nostalgic and timeless. Again, speaking of a message that is still particularly resonant in our world, dealing with, self-destructive tendencies in life, self-harming behavior, suicide, different things like that, right? Very much a contemporary, sadly, but a tragic mainstay in our lives today, even though the song debuted like in the early 2000s. And you watch the song again, even just on review, it has a nice nostalgic rewind effect. Again, I think back of my earlier foundation, how I approach music, and it's got that vibe to it. But Fallen in Reverse came along, kept it faithful, actually changed maybe the direction of it, but still, just as much as Papa Roach did, amplified the pathos appeal of the lyrics so that they do truly connect with the viewer in such a unique way. Let's see which direction Project VELA takes. I'm genuinely curious, because again, we're looking at this point, I don't think we've ever had an experience before where we've consulted covers on the channel from the same song from two different artists. So it'd be cool to see, again, as I said, the variety of approaches different talents take. We're going to explore that together for first introduction. And if you've never been introduced to Project VELA, I do recommend them. You should dig back in their earlier catalog. Maybe some of you are long-standing fans that perhaps predate even myself. So maybe you're going to get the fun experience. Well, I know I'm covering this late, so for sure some of you will. You're getting the perspective of somebody who is happening upon this as a fresh introduction, but maybe you've already heard it. So it'll maybe invigorate an interest in the piece at a deeper level, but we'll just get to enjoy it together, right? I love that about music, that we can have that corporate sense of enjoyment, right? It's not just something in isolation that you humor. We're highlighting good art together, and we're exploring, again, the different reach of covers, especially on Papa Roach. Maybe there were others that'll jump on the train of reinventing this particular song to suit their own styles. Who knows? Project VELA and You've Never Dies, that's the latest variation, at least what I'm checking out. Let's take a look at it. Video will queue up in a second alongside the song, and I believe the lyrics are incorporated. Many of you know in terms of formatting, I like to provide that for any audience member that wants to read along with the narrative of the piece, or maybe you didn't know that. Maybe this is the first introduction for you. In this case, the video provides the narrative, so that'll be on screen for you to read along in and remind yourself of the original inspirational work. Here we go, though. Papa Roach. Second time we're hearing a reinvention between Project VELA and my first ever introduction to You've Never Dies. So I'll have to look at them in a deeper level. Maybe they'll grace the channel someday in terms of more dominant presence. But let's hear this and what direction it takes.
Cut my life into pieces.
Okay.
This is my last resort. Suffocation, no breathing. Don't give a fuck if I cut my own bleeding.
This is a layered vocal set, but it taps back into that rock grooves. This is much closer to the original work.
Cut my life into pieces. I've reached my last resort. Suffocation, no breathing. Don't give a fuck if I cut my arm bleeding. Do you even care if I die bleeding?
It's strong.
If I took my life tonight.
I love their lead vocalist style. Again, it's quite strong and it's sort of. It takes on more. So there is a point of departure, again, like I said, on the genre field. This is much more of a metal emphasis, rather than just the fun, fun, but like the energetic liveliness of the rock group. This is a little stronger. And a good mix between, I think, some more spoken word that transfers a bit of a more, on occasion, of a melodic backend. Yeah, much more of a metal root. This really is such a strong number today. It really hasn't lost anything, even just all these years later, nearly 2 decades. A little over that, I think. Good presence on the vocals on that line. I love the delivery and execution there.
Cut my life into pieces. This is my last resort. Suffocation, no breathing. Don't give a fuck if I cut my own bleeding. 'Cause I'm losing my sight, losing my mind. Wish somebody would tell me I'm fine.
This is good. As strong as the original work. taps right back in that original feeling. On both lyrical ambition, yes, and musical application. That was good. As I said in the cover landscape to review, varied approaches. Sometimes you'll have an artist that will keep a work much more in a mainstream presence to what originally came before, right, in the inspirational spirit, and it will feel like a follow-up. Well, it won't express much individual reinvention in terms of changing. It won't be... Okay, let me phrase this better. I'm not trying to sound intentionally judgmental at all. It won't endure as much of a stark facelift as other covers might portray, right? As I said, with some qualifiers, you might see that in genre, key choice, vocal pacing, energy, emphasis, maybe changes in duration even from time to time. You know, again, I've seen a broad mixture in the cover field. But you have other works that reside more, like I said, in terms of a transference, but a faithful application that doesn't deviate as much. This is one such example. That's really interesting. Like I said, I was fascinated by the idea, again, from covering Fallen in Reverse last night and seeing how they tailored the piece, finding an opportunity of, hey, someone else I know that I've been meaning to happen upon in terms of coverage focus on the channel. Let's feature a comparison, do a bit of like a versus, right? Not to compare the two in terms of like providing a ranking. I hate to do that because I don't want to overshadow the strengths of one work in comparison. Ever say like, oh, that one's lesser than, even just inadvertently. Fallen in Reverse's reinvention is quite dramatic. It's a real change, but it's good. Again, it doesn't lose the essence of what Papa Roach originally manifested in his original tune, and I admire it for that. I find it to be quite respectful, at least in my own opinion. I would imagine this feels, I mean, I don't want to speak for Papa Roach, but I would imagine, you know, if I were him, I would feel quite honored at seeing a band take the presence of the original tune, keeping the key, keeping the pacing, keeping its strength, and particular elements on the vocals, right? Keeping that aggressive spoken word assertion that puts it centrally into that rock metal space. But this one takes more of a metal bend, right? Some of the lyrics take on more of a growl and a raspiness and a fierceness, right? Where there's an interweaving. I love this. There's an interweaving between spoken and melodic, and it's so natural. I was trying to place maybe who it is. I have not yet been exposed deeply to Youth Never Dies. This is very much a first introduction. I have to look deeper into them. So placing the differences in the vocals might be a bit more difficult for me because it is such a first experience, but I forget the frontman's name of Project VELA at the moment, but that was good in terms of a delivery from what I heard from him. But again, on that vocal presence centrally, the darting between the two different styles, maintaining again that aggressive edge. This is very much done in faith to the original inspiration, right? It doesn't change much. Maybe subtle is the wrong word. I was going to say it's subtle modification, but then it's such an in-your-face reinvention in terms of its assertiveness and its power and ferocity that you're like, well, subtle might be not the right way to describe this. But I mean, like, in terms of its nuances, they're smaller, right? They're more defined. Much of the tune is kept again to the original skeleton, and not much is disrupted at all. But little tweaks are made to provide this unique style and assertion that I think amplifies that revolutionary spirit that the original piece communicates quite well, especially in being a confrontation to the mainstay troubles that we endure in life, right? To whatever application we might provide. This song just still connects so well. It's timeless. It resonates beautifully. Again, that authenticity of the lyrics beautifully communicates, again, that type of catharsis I love experiencing in the metal world. And I've said that many times. I admire the metal space largely for that reason, aside from just good delivery generally. I love how this piece amplifies, again, that rage. It's central. You interweave, again, a more aggressive, ferocious delivery. And it feels like a confrontation to the status quo. I love that. Again, the differences here, compared to the original work, are a little smaller, right? They're more defined, they're more precise. They're not as evident compared to like Fallen in Reverse, for example, which again is of equal standing and prominence, but is such a different tailoring. This, as I was saying, this is an example going forward where we've never had the experience before of doing a comparison between different covers of the same piece. It's fun to study, right? Music can offer that, potentially. This one does. I quite like the comparison, right? I'd be curious to hear, by the way, which one is your favorite down below. If you've not humored Fallen in Reverses, the reimagined version of Last Resort, as they call it, I would recommend that, so you can get a good field of vision between the two and see the differences and similarities, perhaps, and maybe some approaches taken. There are a couple. I mean, the raspiness on the vocals, even Ronnie Radke, Fallen in Reverses from, and employed that too. But again, it was done from much more of like a ballad symphonic structure. It just sounds so different. This taps again more into that Papa Roach feel of what was evident by that original inspirational work. It doesn't change much, but I appreciate the subtlety. I'm just going to use it because I know it's probably not the best descriptor to use, but just for lack of a better term, the subtlety of the tailoring. Quite beneficial to reinventing the piece in such a magnified way, but then you don't feel like as well it changes that much. It still feels, again, so reverential, and that's what you hope for on a cover. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below on this piece, and from whatever angle you approach you take, if you do wish to disclose us, longtime fan of Project VELA, or this is a first entrance for you. Again, more to come. It is my intention. This is the first work in a line of a few. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I've been meaning to get to them again. I know this name for a while, but I thought this would be a particular fun entrance, right? Normally I would start on the original tunes attribution, but I'm like, again, I covered Fallen in Reverse's Last Resort last night, and I couldn't avoid the temptation of humoring, at least on a faster note, the versus model. I think it's kind of cool, isn't it? Just get, again, I've seen this personally with the many covers I've humored. The differences in approach. Great example of this in comparing the two pieces, right? And seeing still two pieces that I feel of equal standing are quite respectful to the original work. It's just so cool to see, again, different flares artists take, where one deviates, one looks much more faithful in terms of original and entrance level artifice. But then when you start to study it, you see like, there's the differences, right? The attention to detail. It's impressive to see, and how well it's executed. I think this piece was a faithful cover. I don't like to speak for anybody, but if I were Papa Roach, I would feel quite honored. I think Project VELA provided a great job on that, as well as Youth Never Dies. That was a great cover. Feels so honorable, but yet very much in style to, based on my familiarity, Project VELA. And maybe Youth Never Dies as well. Again, I'll try and get introduced to them at some point. That was a first great entrance step for sure, though. I will give them that credit. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.